Namaste and welcome everyone. I hope you've had a good week between the last time we put a podcast on and this week. This week we continue our quest for the inner works of Aware in a World Asleep, a principled way for living spiritually. This is episode 3. It happens to correspond with chapter 3 in the book. And we get now to the first of the principles that we're going to explore in this book. There are several of them which are very important to consider as you work your way through wanting to live spiritually. So, principle 1. When you become aware of what you really are, you be what you really want to see. And a quote from Theodore Rothke, "My silences become more accurate." Think about that for a second. My silences become more accurate. So the question could be, more accurate than what? That's to be answered. Belief into reality. The first thing I would like you to know, that's GNOW, about this principle, is that it is the truth. Those who know me well also know I like to take others to the seat of their own truth. So I will extend this view into a spiritual perspective. I will say this in spiritual terms. What you be is what you really are. Forgive this illiterate substitute for correct grammar, but you get the point, I'm sure. If you want to find out the truth of your being, you must first become aware of who you are not, so you can see what you really are. You can then behave or manifest life from that deeper level of understanding. Having said that, if you want to find out who you are looking in exactly the right place all around you. This worldly consciousness consists of dualistic, ego-materialistic illusion, a consciousness fulfilled through the illusory roles we play. Unfortunately, we mostly take on our roles as our real identity, and we end up taking ourselves way too seriously. The only thing is there are not two powers, divine consciousness and ego consciousness. The latter is only a figment of our belief in it, and thus not real at all. Collective or mass consciousness perpetrates and perpetuates duality when we are unaware. When you find yourself saying something like, "I just do not know who I am anymore," or asking, "Is this all there is to life?" These are a sure sign that it is your inner self, soul, calling you to full awareness of what you really are. We need that bump in the night, so to speak, to awaken us to the only real life. This spiritual calling will inform you that all you thought you wanted is not anything real and therefore cannot last. All the houses and all the money and all the cars and yes, even all the love relationships in the world can neither satisfy nor ever make you truly happy. Only by living in the truth of our spiritual consciousness can we truly be happy. Here's why. Because conscious awareness of what we really are is happiness and joy. It is abundance. It is peace of mind. All of these are natural characteristics and attributes we find when we abandon illusion. The real truth can be no less. Simply put, the material world is not the place to seek spiritual completion. All we strive for outside us only speaks to seeing happiness through roles we play, rather than understanding that we are, and always have been, happiness as a divine idea. Our belief in or consciousness of the material realm cannot provide these, for they are not in the same world most of us live in. Jesus said this, "My kingdom," that is, my life, my consciousness, "is not of this world." In the tongue of metaphysics, it could well be read as, my life is of spirit, wisdom expressed as inspiration, not of senses, not of the material world, not of these false idols like ego and collective consciousness. The distinction Jesus made was abundantly clear. especially because he was speaking spiritually and not materially. So when you change how you see to the spiritual way, what you see will be the truth about real life. How can this be, you ask? Because your sight will have changed from material to spiritual, and spiritual is the only perfect vision. Your way of seeing will have changed from literally or intellectually seeing something to gaining insight and enlightenment about it. If you want this perfect vision, the spiritual 20/20 vision, so to speak, you must go within, for only you can provide yourself with perfect spiritual vision by going into silence, where insight and enlightenment emanate from wisdom, where the divine consciousness you are resides, waiting only for an opportunity to be heard as the perfection it is, and you are. Life begins with listening for intuition, the clear, full awareness of only highest good. Life arrives as we set ourselves free from a belief in dualistic imagery of ego consciousness, essentially letting truth have its way with us. As we fully comprehend this inner meaning, we are brought into the perfection of being we always have been, erasing once and for all the ego consciousness trait of, you guessed it, forgetfulness. You can help yourself in many ways. One way often suggested is to follow this admonition. Our highest selves help those who help themselves. Unfortunately, this is only a half-baked ego-centered idea. The more wholesome variety is, our highest self helps those who help themselves. And here's the biggest part, by going within for help. There is a big difference between these two forms of admonition. The first leads us to rugged individuality and the idea that we can think or work ourselves into the right thing for us. This is the way that comes from a belief in ego consciousness and is rendered as self-righteousness. In the dualistic world, we have no real idea what is best for us. None. Oh, you think you might, but none. Believe me. How do we shift from this false belief, you ask? Paraphrasing Jesus, he said to us, give it no thought. The longer statement is, not one of you can add 1 cubit of good to your life through thought. His meaning is clear enough, is it not? Truth be known, GNOWN, of course. So what's the key to becoming more aware? Just as a reminder of what you already know about yourself, capital S on self, if you only go within for the truth of the matter, you will quickly come to know who you are not. And that will tell you what you are. Lord knows we have labored under the untruth of all those roles we have played long enough. Sometimes we have belabored the point until we have become the very drama we've tried to avoid. If you look up who and what in Webster's new universal unabridged dictionary, you will find that who refers to roles we play. Roles we play are the ego's way of shifting the attention from the truth of what we are to a game of role-playing, none of which is real at all. We make it up as we go. One unfortunate aspect of role-playing is that as we give ourselves to those roles with all we are, we take our identity from them. Unfortunately, all too often we become hopelessly attached to them. Roles we play are not what we are, not where we find our real identity. Our real identity is not found in some belief called a role, but rather only in the truth of our being. To make matters even worse, making our living out of role-playing sets us up for being judges to how well we are fulfilling each role. This puts the attention on the judgmental nature of ego consciousness, rather than the simple discernment applied to how true we are to what we really are. By discernment, I mean that spiritual truth is validated through simple comprehension of whether or not one is expressing conscious awareness of one's truth. This plays out by the means validating the ends. Each of our actions validates the end of expressing our divinity. This contrasts with what we find by exercising one's ego consciousness through judgmental application, that which divides and keeps us separate one from another by believing the ends justify the means. They simply do not. This may well explain why so many of us feel such a deep emotional turbulence during the transitions between the many roles we play. We have attached our identity to a moving target, our false belief, one after another. When the roles shift, we tend to think we have lost our identity because the role is gone and so must our identity have faded with it. We are not only afraid we have lost our identity, but in more dramatic cases like retirement, for example, we feel like we are about to die. In the spiritual sense, this is true. A false image, a former idol, as it were, a falsely placed attachment to an identity affixed to a role, dies to the truth of the matter. When we give no power to role-playing, we are born again to truth, our only real identity. It is this born-again nature that I call awareness, the spiritual acknowledgement of the voice of wisdom we are led to express. It is heroic to allow oneself to become aware of wisdom in our midst, and then to live by it and it alone. Remember this, there is nothing opposed to the voice heard in silence, and thus nothing we need to choose over some figment of illusion. Truth just is and needs only to be lived, to be. To be or not to be, that is the question. Indeed, Shakespeare was a genius. If our belief in duality and its relentless penchant for roles as a vehicle for identification is what we're living in any given moment, who or what is it we really are, and what, therefore, is our real identity? Again, the same dictionary source, the term what refers to the essence of being, divine consciousness. That is our essential being and our only real identity. This true identity can never change, no matter how we behave on a day-to-day basis. Identity is very much like character. We don't need to develop either. Life merely reveals them to us. Each is already present, awaiting only our awareness and expression. Life provides the opportunity for doing so endlessly. After all this time, we finally come to realize the truth. We are not a who at all, but rather a what. I know that sounds impersonal, but that does not change the truth finally found. What, being the essence of our wisdom, waiting to be personified, is what informs our meaning and purpose, and it foresees its manifestation out into the world. What could be more beautiful and more complete? In this regard, it will do us well to recall Jesus' admonition. I knew your name before you were born. What could that possibly mean? When viewing this declaration spiritually, we are able to discern that before we were born into duality, we were called something other than human. Well, fetus maybe. What might that be? Go within. Give no thought. Obviously, I cannot know or list your responses here. Only you can fathom the truth for you, after all. What came up for me was the name divine. Why not? After all, we call a newborn baby divine. We label our new lover divine. We even give testimony to some culinary orgasm as simply divine. However, there is even a precursor to divine. It is each inspirational idea. Yes, idea. Every spiritual demonstration begins with inspiration, a divine idea that activates it into being. Just do not take divine into the world of duality by saying that divine to exist as an idea, what is not divine must also exist as a thought form or idea. That is a familiar dualistic argument against God or our highest self being all. Do not go there. It is a delusional path that can only lead you astray. Such an idea is a distraction from spiritual reality, when inner spirit, inspiration, or idea is the only spiritual reality that activates demonstration out of wisdom. Hence, our soul, S-O-L-E, and soul, S-O-U-L, purpose of physical being. In this vein, it is easier to give up the idea that we are some potential entity separate from the rest of the world and our higher self, or instead accept and live the truth that we are all that is. We are formed in the image and the likeness of the only personal one, yet infinitely individualized as you and me. Someone certainly could say that formed in another's image is hardly personal, yet in the spiritual world such judgments fail to exist. No such labels apply. If we persist in feeling that such a portrayal is impersonal, it is just the ego in us that is insisting on taking what is not personal personally. Taking it personally is a sure sign that we are still under the illusory influence of ego consciousness. To think that we are a separate personal entity and not akin to the higher one is the height of vanity. Vanity is the ego's prize weapon, used to combat our inner knowing that we are one. It is the ego's way to have us reside in a warped consciousness that says we are individual personalities, a series of roles playing as if they are what determine our identity. So forget any idea of having a pity party about thinking you are made from impersonal divine consciousness. How much more personal can we be formed than have our own being demonstrated out of the one and only being? The terms or labels impersonal and personal do not really matter anyhow. It's only when we are performing an ego consciousness that we need such labels. Ego requires them to separate us. Once again, in spiritual consciousness, such labels are non-existent, all in one, and that is all that matters. As we begin each moment of the truth found in wisdom, we come to life from a rich foundation of what we really are, instead of the false notions of who we are not. The question here becomes this: are you wed to the consciousness of divine essence which comes only from within? Or are you instead wed to the reflection of the ego's view, which comes mostly from believing what so many have told us about who we are or ought to be? Then, of course, there is the huge influence of thousands of years of mass consciousness weighing on us. Yet most of us are not even aware of this existence, let alone of its huge influence when we are unaware of inner truth. Spiritual speaking, this is a definitive metaphysical declaration, if I ever heard one. Life is not about finding who you are. Our existence is about expressing life out of what we are. What we are is divine consciousness, essence, divine idea, inspiration or wisdom activated into demonstration, and it is always, always the truth. When lacking awareness, we are led to believe we are less than good enough. We are original sinners, and we are separate from what we call God. Not so, and absolutely not so. Nothing can take away the truth of infinity, immortality, and eternal awareness, not even if some church leader or holy writ seems to say so. In the inward way, God and we are one, our highest self, that is, and we are one. Each and all is that. Jesus said, I and my Father are one. Of course, he did not mean that God was his biological father, or that his mother was irrelevant to his declaration, and that somehow they are joined at the hip. Rather, it is conscious awareness of wisdom that regularly and faithfully parents our individualization of it. So the terms father and mother lack real meaning here. Saying that God creates all means that wisdom, when understood and obeyed or followed, is that which demonstrates all like itself. This refers to all of us the same. Yes, all is like you and me in this spiritual world. We are, after all, one. This is atonement. Said another way, this is at one-ment demonstrated. In the I, the letter I of the beholder. To clarify the I, that is in I am, that I am, not I am that I am, is the one and only I. This one I is the impersonal, grand, eternal, immortal one and only infinite I of all sentient beings. Yet this divine I or divine consciousness is infinitely individualized. Think of the meaning of Jesus' declaration this way: whatever God is, I also am that. I am. This also makes all of us that. We are truthfully. In the world in which Jesus spoke, we truly are one in being. Therefore, there is no grand I, a God, and a lot of little I's, you and me. There is only one I, and we drop the error in our thinking that limits us to our puny selves. We begin manifesting as the one and only I we really are. What is it this one and only I looks like? We cannot describe what the highest essence or divine inspiration looks like. Rather, inwardly, we experience it as the face of wisdom. One way or another, I dare say each of us has experienced our highest self, our innate essence, as our innate wisdom that waits to inform us as we become aware. When we more clearly understand our relation with this through experiencing wisdom in the depths of our hearts, we come to comprehend that consciousness is all there is. Spiritually, then, we find ourselves to be and manifest no other love, no other wisdom or truth, no other sense of life, because this is law all life contains and is. Now, this is our real identity, the universal, divine, impersonal, one and only I, the face experienced as wisdom witnessed. Our highest self, that you are that, and so am I. And the good news is that we can never lose what we really are. Not unlike the rest of the universe, what we really are is the one wisdom infinitely individualized. The common error in our thinking that we are so much less than the one I that we ourselves manifesting mostly what is not of divine consciousness or for wisdom's source at all. This is not the truth. This feeling less than we really are, or even less than simply good enough, is an erroneous vision of life. Trapped in this misunderstanding of life and our part in it, we feel compelled to work extra hard just to gain life's approval and feel we have some individual worth. This is a sure sign we have trapped ourselves in the illusory world of the ego. The truth is that most of us, most of the time, are exhibiting or demonstrating divine consciousness. The self-perceived so-called errors in our behavior consist only of a relatively minor distancing from our truth. This is caused by our belief in the absence of eternal wisdom, rather than acknowledging it as our only truth of being. Said another way, we're temporarily exhibiting an erroneous belief in the absence of some God, or which we behave in some untoward fashion. It could simply be that we've temporarily forgotten what we really are. This is largely because we've been influenced by the historical belief in collective consciousness, the belief in being separate from some God on high, whom we cannot ever please because of our sinful nature. In a word, this is sheer nonsense. We can benefit mightily from exploring the forgotten principles that make life real. Jesus lived in the framework of spirit and thus beckoned all who would follow his way to do the very same. Even as powerful as his vision was, John the Baptist saw God and all else. He saw man as beneath and separate from God. He couldn't carry Jesus' sandals, it has been said, meaning that he could not walk in Jesus' shoes, that is, fully fathom his way of being spiritually what Jesus saw. The only thing he saw was the embodiment of all his divine essence, with nothing to change, nothing to heal. Jesus was the master metaphysician, In his mind, duality did not exist. Wisdom, or the Christ, was the only reality that fed his life. Just remember that in a metaphysical sense, it is not healing that is taking place. Instead, it is a shift in meaning we are giving life, and thus holding the spaciousness for all others to be entranced in this same self-fulfilling grace. It is in this grace that our pain and afflictions disappear from view, and we see life anew. Using the ego for good. Now, that sounds strange, I know, but it is possible. As a matter of fact, I would say it's a must. Some think we need to get rid of our ego in order to be spiritual. Not so. Spiritually, the appearance of ego or the small self can be helpful. How, you say? How, you ask? The varied expressions of a belief in ego consciousness can provide more than simple testimony to a belief in a separation from God or spiritual consciousness. Well then, how can this be helpful, you might ask? The ego can be helpful just like the large feathery cobwebs on the long wood plank bridge I travel over my meditative walk every other day. We can refer to them in several ways. Are they scary and dangerous, or simply metaphors for the ways we can feel or get trapped and devoured by illusion, the rational lies we have been led to believe are truth? The cobwebs can be seen as part of life's simple beauty, especially when backlit, that is, was seen as a glorious spiritual gift to the planet. Seen with disfavor, they tell us that on the illusory plane of ego consciousness, they are material traps that can trip us up. However, we can be more aware. We can avoid these illusory traps by staying on our real path of truth expressed. We just stand tall and walk on our truth, right past the illusions we erroneously think can pull us down or trap us. When we see or project outside us, our screen of life is the mere representation of our current level of consciousness. It is an image depicting a direct relation between how we are seeing our divinity and its expression. In the absence of this understanding, we find it easy to see faults and errors in and by others. Yet when we are troubled by what we are seeing, it is sure evidence that we are in some fashion denying these very same characteristics in ourselves. Maybe in a different form, but they're there. If you see one abusing another, for example, and the abuse bothers you a good deal, this could well mean that somehow you are abusive towards yourself. Of course, we could naturally want to stop the abuse, and should. If the abuse is against us and we tolerate it, we can be assured that we are being abusive in at least two ways. First, we are being abusive toward ourselves for allowing the abuse to continue toward us. We also are being abusive towards the abuser, for to allow the other to abuse holds them in self-contempt, guilt, and shame, and perhaps prophesies a future jail sentence. By enabling them, we thus become the real abuser, often out of a false sense of compassion. Real compassion, like everything else, begins at home, within. When we come to a view of life that begins in the seat of wisdom, we treat ourselves with compassion out of loyalty to the truth, our truth. If we observe an effect in material life that does not match spiritual consciousness, like seeing someone being rude or manipulative, we can take it simply as a sign that we still believe we are separated from divine consciousness. That is not the truth, but dressed in a gown of duality. This is how we are seeing and expressing it. Seen instead in a newfound awareness, we change our perception back to the original, true form, from ego consciousness or duality back to spiritual consciousness. In this way, various appearances of ego consciousness, whether they are our own way or expressed by another, regularly inform us of yet another opportunity to become aware of what we really are. This is where our character shows up, validating our change in behavior. When we see wisdom not in, but as one and all, we also come to respect the dignity of it all. There are no real differences when we see all of life as divine essence. We are all the same, not identical, mind you, but because each of us and everything is a divine individualization of the essence of being. The divine nature found in wisdom is the essential element of life. How wisdom is formed constitutes the individualization and individualization of the common truth each of us is. What we now seem to be is the outward manifestation of our current state of divine awareness. Thus, all one need do to find out what that state is to look in the mirror called life and view it, unattached to its outcome, mind you. In this way, we step away from the judgmental nature of ego consciousness and accept what we see with the fullness of compassion we deserve. Now we're able to see with various expressions of ego consciousness can inform and point us to the truth. We all know truth when we see it. We see the truth with our spiritual eyes, through intuition and insight, and the darkness of ignorance turns into light via deep meaning through enlightenment. Here is the be-all, end-all of the matter. In the prologue to the Gospel of John, we are told, "In the beginning was the Word. The Word was with God, and the Word is God." The Word, as we now know, is awareness of wisdom waiting to be expressed. Being aware of truth, living from it, brings this consciousness into the world on every plane of existence. It is our being. It is divine consciousness found in wisdom that leads us eternally through life as the highest good for one and all. Seen from this perspective, then, what the Gospel of John is saying to us is that at the initiation of any manifestation of truth is the awareness of eternal wisdom, that which ushers truth across the threshold of life. It follows just as divine or first, that is, the only cause, is inseparable from its effect, that wisdom is truth, because wisdom is God. It is such grace that we finally come to know what I is. Truly, I am that, and so are you that. Wisdom individualized and individuated, for sure, is what we are. Truly, when you become aware of what you really are, you'll be what you really want to see. Well, let that baby sink in and see where we go. It's pretty nice, no matter how you think about it. You may be shook by some of these things, that's fine, be shook. Don't take them for what they are. Drink them in. Discern for yourself what the truth of the matter is for you. You know that I like to end with a post that I've seen here or there throughout the previous week that might inform us of a little nugget to take with us, one we can chew on in addition to what you've heard me read to you. This one was posted by Mariam Hasna. True love does not ask you to change who you are. It simply invites you into a safe space where you can stop being who you are not. Oh, that is lovely. Let me give that one to you once again. True love does not ask you to change who you are. Don't let anybody do that, folks. It simply invites you into a safe space where you can stop being who you are not. And so it is. And so, till next week, dear friends, I hope you are happy and healthy. I hope that you know you are loved and will see love all around you, wherever you may appear. And so, until next week, namaste, friends. I love you.